Hello, my fellow Americans. I'm Bill Lipinski. This is Two Guys on Politics, and the number one guy is up next, Ray Hanania.
And I am Ray Hanania, and this is July 18, 2024, Season 3, Episode 20. And we got a bunch of topics that all kind of tie in. We're going to talk a little bit about the attempted assassination of former President Trump, the impact of the attempted assassination on Trump and the RNC Convention. They finally, as a result of this, they granted Secret Service protection to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Finally, I think. Who is JD Vance? What does he represent? And actually, finally, the growing need or the growing concern, the mounting concern that many Democrats continue to have for Biden's ability to win the election. Will they push him out of the election? Can Kamala Harris become the next candidate, or will it somebody else? Let's start with, what did you think of the attempted assassination of the former president, Bill?
Well, I was alive and knowledgeable when John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated. I remember his brother being assassinated, Robert Kennedy. I remember when George Wallace was shot. I certainly remember when Ronald Reagan was shot. So I'm familiar with these. They're all reprehensible. It certainly isn't in the spirit of America. I am very sorry that it happened. I'm glad that Trump was not assassinated. I think it was an extremely fortunate thing for him, though, frankly, because I think a lot of people have now decided that they are going to strongly consider voting for him. And I believe that if he decides to take a different course in his campaigning and be more civil and talk more about issues and not personalities, he will be extremely difficult to defeat in November.
Yeah, I agree with you that, of course, I grew up in this assassination culture that really is kind of, a lot of baby boomers, recognize that John F. Kennedy, that assassination, the Robert F. Kennedy assassination, the Reverend Martin Luther King assassination, the attacks on the Alabama governor, and then Ronald Reagan. I mean, too often people, can't get their way in politics, so they think that shooting somebody is going to make a difference. And as it turned out in this case, I mean, wow, this one could have been a terrible tragedy had it not been for the fact that Donald Trump moved his head just slightly. He could have been killed that day. And it really was shocking that we've gotten to that level of ugly politics in this country. This is a 20-year-old kid. Now, these other assassins have been much older, and now it's getting younger. And what does that tell us? That tells us this polarization and the animosity and the fighting, the name calling, the bickering. It's really filtering its way down to a younger generation of people who feel that their only option is, this kid didn't even vote. This kid Crooks, who they identified as being the attempted assassin, he didn't even vote yet. This would have been his first election to vote at. And before even voting as an option, he turned to use his weapon. And unfortunately, though, while I don't recall seeing any elected officials saying too bad the shooter missed, a lot of people on social media, liberals, people on the left, have been saying that, and it's just horrible. It's just a horrible thing to hear.
And no one should be advocating assassinations in this country. It is totally un-American. And I failed to mention Martin Luther King, and I did so because he was not a politician; he was a clergyman.
Correct.
But that too was a horrendous, thing, and it certainly resulted in some very, very strong rioting throughout this country. Unfortunately, I don't know if the the rioting really, came to improve anything in particular. Well, I've said it, you've said it, it's a terrible thing, it's un-American. And let's hope and pray it doesn't happen anymore in the future.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, what impact has it had? Now, some people say it strengthens Trump, but I don't think the attempted assassination by itself is strengthening Trump. I think that the strengthening of Trump's political position started at that debate. And I really do believe the CNN effort to restrict the debate to help Biden forced Trump to restrain himself, but put the focus on Biden so people could see who he really was and how bad he really was, his circumstance. And I think maybe, I don't know, that Trump saw something then and it's continued. And I think the attempted assassination is reinforcing this new Donald Trump, because he's not the same combative, obstreperous, name-calling, petty candidate that he was 4 years ago. When he was when he was president, or when he was running for president, before his election, 8 years ago. He seems like he's a different person, and I think this is just another thing that has changed him to make him a little calmer, because that's what I see today, a much calmer, reasoned Trump. Even though I don't agree with everything he says, he's not the same combative politician he was in the past.
Well, we'll see tonight, starting at 9 o'clock Chicago time, when he takes center stage at the Republican National Convention. We'll see what he has to say at that particular time. I agree with you. His reconstruction, his becoming the man next door, started at the debate. The debate structure was supposed to help Biden. It helped Trump considerably. His tweets, his statements since these attempted assassination have been very moderate, very positive. So tonight, if he continues in that vein, if he continues to be the man next door and simply talks about issues, stops talking about personalities, I don't see how the Democrats will be able to defeat him, to be perfectly honest with you, because I think he will win over the vast majority of the uncommitted because of his behavior. And I think he'll be, once again, elected president.
And I hate to use this phrase, one good thing that came out of this attempted assassination, because there's nothing good about this anytime trying to silence somebody with violence. But it did force the Biden administration to allow the Secret Service to protect Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, in my mind, of all the politicians, given the history of the assassinations against John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s father, Robert F. Kennedy, he should have gotten Secret Service as soon as he announced that he was running for president. They've tried to marginalize Robert F. Kennedy because they know how vulnerable Biden is. And the Biden administration has tried their best to marginalize him, keep him off the ballot. And one way was to deny him Secret Service, which to me is just horrific that they would do that. He's the one person I would have feared might have been the target of an assassination attempt. But Biden was forced to lift that ban that he imposed, and it just continues to fall apart for Biden. I mean, even doing the right thing doesn't make Biden look good. Doing the right thing only reinforces the fact that he was doing the wrong thing until now.
Well, doing the right thing really should be immediately when it should be done.
Right.
And he should have been given protection, I agree with you, immediately upon announcing for the presidency, particularly because of his family's history. Another thing about Joe Biden, a few months ago, he woke up and decided too many people were coming into this country illegally across the border. And he finally decided to do something about that. Well, the time to do something about that would have been the day after he was sworn in as president. but he allowed a wide open border. He allowed so many people to come into this country. I don't think he should be given much credit for now turning off the spigot. He should have turned it off 3.5 years ago. So sometimes when you're late, even though you do the right thing, it's too late.
Yeah, I of course completely agree with that. I think that it only hurts him and puts a spotlight on something that people weren't talking about. How does this play? I mean, well, let's talk about. I don't know if we should talk about the impact. Maybe we should talk about the impact on Biden's reelection. This attempted assassination for at least a few days took away the oxygen from the growing calls of Democrats for Biden to step down. And I thought, I wonder if this is going to be, the event that prevents that from happening. But it looks like it's reviving again, even more so. And it's not getting better for Joe Biden. What do you think of the chances? Do you think that Biden is going to step down? Because I do believe he is going to step down, and I think they'll turn it over to somebody else.
I agree with you. I think that the pressure is continuing to mount. When you have the Democratic head of the Senate, Schumer, advocating that he step down, maybe not publicly, but certainly privately to him. When you have Nancy Pelosi advocating that, and now I think you're up to something like about 22 members of the House of Representatives publicly advocating that. I believe there's one Democratic senator in the fact that he's off the campaign trail now because of the COVID. Some recent shot of him going up the short steps to Air Force One, where he stumbled, that didn't help him at all. I know he's been on a number of programs being interviewed by people, and he's done a very good job. But we cannot afford to have him be our representatives when he is dealing with Putin or the head of China or even our allies. We need a more competent individual. And I think Joe Biden's a nice guy. Many things he did were okay. Some of the things he did were not very good at all. But it's time for him to go. And I hope he sees the light for the good of the Democratic Party and for the good of America, because we need strong people, credible people running for president. And right now, he certainly does not fulfill any of those qualities.
Yeah, and I think I'm not sure if Trump has changed or if it's a political strategy, but it almost looks like he really has changed. But I was a little disturbed by his vice presidential choice, JD Vance. This is a guy I don't know anything about. This is a guy who was an atheist for most of his life and only recently became a Christian. And he says he's an isolationist. He doesn't want to have anything to do with any country except one, the one country that fuels more money into our political system, Israel. And I think that kind of, he says he's a Christian. And I have to be honest with you, you cannot be a Christian if you support the kind of violence that we're seeing in the Middle East where Christianity arose. But aside from that, I don't know who JD Vance is. I didn't like his isolationist platform, his criticism of the Ukraine. He should have been talking about restraining Putin, taking down Putin, and doing it so that we can save the taxpayer monies by winning the war, not by withdrawing it from an ally that we should be supporting. So to me, those things are disturbing and raise some issues about Trump that I think are legitimate, that a Democratic candidate could address if they could get away from this image that he's not cognitive. A strong Democrat has many issues that could be argued effectively if we can get away from where we're at today.
Well, I agree with everything you had to say about Vance. I will go one step further. I cannot support an individual who was as critical of Donald Trump as he was.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people have been very critical against Trump. I don't have any problem with that because I'm certainly not a fan of Donald Trump. But Vance went out of his way on numerous occasions to be enormously critical of Trump. He called him a fascist. He called him Adolf after Adolf Hitler. Now, all of a sudden, he's running for the US Senate. He wants Trump's endorsement. So he starts backtracking on the negative things he had to say against Trump. He gets elected. Once he gets elected, he even starts backtracking more on the negative things he said against Trump. And then all of a sudden he says he was wrong about Trump. Trump has done a great job as president of the United States because he knows that Trump is going to need a new vice president. And to me, he's just kowtowed to him entirely. And the speech that he gave last night was one of the most boring vice president speeches I have ever heard. Why? Because he didn't want to say anything that would upstage, his president. By the same token, he is a very, very dynamic speaker when he chooses to be. I've heard him speak on other occasions. But last night, he wanted to make sure he didn't do anything that would upset Trump because he wants to be Trump's total submissive individual, not like the last vice president he had who turned against him towards the end of his term, Mike Pence. So now I have no use. Now, he wrote that book, Hillbilly something, I forget the last.
Or something. Yeah, I never heard of it, and I'm never going to read it. Believe me, I'm completely turned off by him. I don't understand it.
Well, if people are not turned off by him, and he campaigns in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania amongst the white working class people, I think he'll do Trump a lot of good because he has spoken eloquently in defending the white working class and how they have been neglected by the federal government in this country. In some cases, they have not only been neglected, they've been punished because they've been, white working class people. He's done that very articulately. He can go into those states and perhaps some others and state that view. I think that will help him. I think that will help him with Trump. But Ray, it all comes down to two things. Joe Biden's got to be replaced by some credible, electable Democratic candidate. And Donald Trump has to continue to come across as the man next door. If he continues to come across as the man next door, he will be reelected president of the United States. I don't really know if Joe Biden steps down and the Democrats would dig up Franklin Delano Roosevelt to run for president again. I don't know if he could defeat Trump because of the attempted assassination, and if it changes Trump's personality to where Trump continues to be a good neighbor, I don't think you could be able to beat him. I think the only thing the Democrats can hope is that he doesn't carry the House and the Senate for the Republicans also. And I hope not, because I believe in divided government. I want to make sure if Trump's going to be the president, that the Democrats control the House or the Senate. I don't care which one, but divided government is very important for the people.
Yeah, and I would say I was a big fan of The Apprentice and Celebrity Apprentice. And the one thing I noticed about Donald Trump was he often stood by his harshest critics because it was a way to buy them off and prevent them from aggravating his life more. So in my view, him picking JD Vance was a part of his strategy, that taking out someone who might have been one of the worst critics. He threw him in the mix for the last couple months. It silenced him. It plays into this thing. Normally presidents pick a vice president, presidential candidate because they want to build up, shore up support in an area of their politics where they're weak. In this case, I think that he wanted to silence somebody who might have hurt him and he's been thinking about it for a while. But let's shift over to our final topic, which would be, who is going to replace Joe Biden if he were to step down? And I will make this one observation. In the last 4 years, I never heard Kamala Harris say anything that sounded like a reasonable speech. He sounded like she was just shallow and just window dressing. I will say over the last week, I have heard 3 of her speeches where I'm thinking Biden's aides are doing everything they can to shore her up. She's made a lot of good speeches. She's been still a little shrill, but I think that they're changing her. I'm not convinced she's strong enough to beat Trump, but I'm saying that they have made a noticeable, discernible change in Kamala Harris over the past week since the debate and since the attempted assassination. Have you noticed that about her?
Yes, I have noticed that about her. I don't know if her image with the American people can be changed significantly enough for her to be elected president. Particularly as I think the whole ball game is with Trump now. I think he holds all the cards. If he continues to be the man next door, the grandfather figure, the guy that gets along with everyone, the guy that's understanding, he's tolerant. Yes, he states his positions, but he doesn't personally attack you because you don't agree with his position. He said, you're entitled to it. It's America. We disagree on the issue. If he continues to go that way, as I say, I don't care who the Democrats put up. It's not going to save the presidency for them. All the Democrats can hope for, and I personally hope for, is that the Democrats manage to control the House or the Senate. Now, I believe that it has to be Kamala. If you don't run her, if Biden steps down, which I believe he will do, he will not be the Democrats' presidential candidate come November. I believe it will be her because she's a Black woman. The most loyal constituency of the Democratic Party are Black women. The only person that she could be replaced by would be Michelle Obama. And Michelle, I understand, continues to say she's not interested. She doesn't want to run. And that's consistent what she has said for 15, 20, 25 years that I have known her and known of her. So I think it's going to be Kamala. I just hope that she runs a strong enough race that, as I say, that the Democrats do not get wiped out in the House and the Senate. I believe if Joe stays on the ticket, they will lose the House and the Senate also.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with you that the African-American voters have probably been the most loyal to the Democratic Party ever, not slating Kamala Harris to be the presidential candidate because I agree with you. I believe Joe Biden is going to step down. He'll be forced to because it's so obvious that he's going to lose. If they don't slate her, it's going to cause a problem in the Democratic Party. But what's interesting to me is that problem could be the rise of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. A lot of upset Democrats might turn to somebody else. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who hasn't really restrained some of his erratic statements and weird, he's not addressing, in my opinion, the issues that Americans want. He relies too much on social media, but a lot of votes could move towards him, and we might see no candidate win enough electoral college votes to become president. I'm not sure Kennedy might win enough to become president, but he could win enough to prevent both the Democratic nominee and whoever that may be and Donald Trump from getting the 270 electoral college votes that they need, which would put America further into disarray than it already is.
Yes, it's certainly. I agree with you. I think that certainly Kennedy can pick up enough electoral votes that neither the Democratic candidate or the Republican candidate gets sufficient votes. And then, as we know, it has to go into the House of Representatives. And Lord only knows what's going to happen if that turns out to be the case. I don't think that's good for the country. I think we should have an orderly process. I mean, and that would be orderly. It's in the Constitution. That's the way it goes. But it's only happened one time. And they actually wound up setting up a special committee. And that committee decided who the president was going to be. And it was a nonpartisan committee. So most people accepted the results. But, we have to start pulling this country together.
Yes.
We have a lot of enemies out there. China, the Ayatollahs, the Russians. I'm sure that there are a few other countries who are not exactly our friends. If we have to be united in order to combat those people. And the only way I believe we're going to be united at the present time is by having divided government.
Yeah, and I think also that the one disappointing response, I mean, at first, after the attempted assassination, I heard President Biden talk about how we must come together, denouncing the use of violence to impact our politics and to, rather than just voting. And he said he wanted to bring the country together. But just as he did when he was first elected, he said the same thing and immediately turned into a divisive person. I don't know if there is a way to save Biden, but I think I would have respected him more if he spent less time attacking Trump and spent more time talking about what he really has done for the country and maintaining that appeal to bring everybody together. He could have reached out to people. He could have gone that road of bringing people together by reaching out to Republicans, by reaching out to people that disagree with him and his critics, but he didn't do that. And unfortunately, I think that was a huge mistake on his part.
Oh, I agree with you. But I no longer think he can do anything about saving his presidency. I think it's all in Donald Trump's hands.
Yeah.
If Donald Trump plays it right, he'll be the president of the United States once again. And it will have been an absolute miraculous recovery from where he was the day after January 6th, when a lot of top flight Republicans were blaming him for the riot that occurred at the Capitol.
Yeah. All right. I'm Ray Hanania.
I'm Bill Lipinski.
And this has been Two Guys on Politics. We thank everybody for listening. You're welcome to comment on our comment section on YouTube. We'd love to hear what you have to say. But thank you, everybody. Bill, it's always a pleasure to go through all of this with you.
Thank you very much. And I'll be happy if our listeners will point out all the places that you are incorrect and all the places where I am absolutely correct. Have a nice day.
All right.